join me in welcoming Julie Garnier, the president and co-founder of Odyssey Conservation Trust. Julie is a pioneering One Health expert and veterinarian for over 25 years of experience integrating community health, biodiversity, conservation, and gender equity. She co-founded the Odyssey Conservation Trust to bring a One Health in Action approach to life, empowering vulnerable communities, particularly women, to regenerate ecosystems and build resilience in some of the world's most threatened landscapes. Please, a huge round of applause for Julie. Somehow, our clock says 14.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you for joining us, Julie. I'm just going to... Julie, since I want to make the most of our time, so I'm going to start off with the questions. What does a gender-responsive One Health approach look like in practice, and why is it essential now more than ever? Because I remember you told me we don't have time, we're running out of time.
Yes, thank you very much, Deepa. And it's a real pleasure to be here and be able to share some experience. And yeah, we now need more than ever a gender-responsive One Health approach. For One Health approach, because One Health is integration, recognizing that human health, animal health, environmental health are connected, interconnected, and you cannot address one without addressing the other. And also, if you want to have more impact, well, you deploy One Health solutions. So solutions which are going to have an impact on all these aspects. And that's what we're doing. So basically, you first need to identify your main challenges in a territory, in a landscape, in a threatened ecosystems, and then identify leverage points by connecting all the different elements and all the different risks. And as we know now, we have very serious crises, the climate crisis, the pollution crisis, the health crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and they're all interconnected. And gender responsive, because also, as we've all said before, women are part of the equation and have got incredible solutions. Women bring transformative change. And this is an incredible leverage point. If you can find and empower women to implement these solutions, to be part of the equation, then the impact is phenomenal, as we all know. So gender responsive One Health, it makes sense. And having a holistic, integrated approach is very important. It's not new. Indigenous people, indigenous wisdom has always recognized that interconnectedness between our health, animal health, and the earth.
Thank you, Julie. And when we had a preparatory call, Julie was very kind enough to share two of the papers that she's authored. And I did read it, and it was quite alarming as well, some of the numbers. So one event really just changed all our lives in different ways, which was COVID-19. And I don't know if we are still living in a parallel world, or if we still recognize the effects it has had on us, on our personalities, on the climate, of course. So my next question brings me to one of your comments or one of your research points in the paper that said a COVID-19 pandemic has become a turning point that really exposed the systemic gender inequities. What do you think were the most urgent lessons that the pandemic taught us about gender and health resilience, and how should they reshape future policy?
Well, I think we probably all have memories of being stuck somewhere and not being able to go out, and having seen the nurses and some of the doctors, mainly women, going out to work and being applauded by people who were stuck in their flats or houses. And just before the pandemic, there had been an incredibly meaningful report by WHO called Led by Men, Delivered by Women. And this is about health policies and health systems. And 75% of health services are delivered by women. And obviously, you know, the main decision-making is made by men, as we know. The gender pay gap is one of the most critical and astute in health services, in the public health sector, when women are so responsible for delivering health. So we have critical issues to address, you know, in terms of decision-making. it needs to be equitable. It needs to be fair. And also, when you're talking about maternal health, sexual, reproductive health, women have to be part of the equation and make decisions, you know? So it's just a critical aspect of giving women the space they deserve in political and decision-making issues.
That was my next question, Julie, maternal health. So how do you see One Health approach specifically benefiting maternal health, particularly in resource-poor settings, and where women face heightened risks during pregnancy and childbirth?
Yes, I think we have to recognize, it's interesting because now more and more, because of a movement in recognizing the importance of having a gender-responsive approach and considering gender, we are seeing that there are more and more studies looking, and we are doing some, in establishing the impacts that some of the health risks are having on pregnant women. And we're finding out, as we are, doing more research, the incredible burden that pregnant women have in terms of waterborne diseases. Some cholera, typhoid fever, take a huge toll on pregnant women. There are also zoonotic diseases such as brucellosis, which are transmitted from livestock or from wildlife to women, which can create abortions. And then, as we were saying in the panel before, when women have got to walk 6 hours to get water and you're pregnant, you can imagine what toll it can have on you, from obviously preterm labor and risks, physical risks. And the other thing that we don't visualize, but I've been living in these settings for more than 20 years in Africa. When you're living at the human-wildlife interface, my main work focuses in threatened ecosystems where you have conservation areas, and I work with communities living around these conservation areas. Quite often, you have water as an interface, as a border between a national park or a conservation area and the community which lives around. And I've got, these very clear memories of pregnant women going to fetch water in the river, which is the border of the national park. Now, it means what? It means you've got elephants coming to drink, you've got crocodiles in the river, you've got hippos, and they take a huge toll on people. It's not without risks to live in a wildlife area. And that we don't consider, and women bear the most risk as well.
Wow. Thank you for that, Julie. But in your work with these communities on the ground, would there be an example or your personal experience that has really left an impact on you, or hasn't, something that has been unforgettable?
I think it's seeing, for example, we have put, I've got many memories, but just putting, for example, in some communities in Zimbabwe living around a national park, and we have put water systems. We have to rehabilitate some water systems for the community. We developed a training program and prevention programs on zoonotic disease. There were rabies problems, kids dying of rabies because they had been bitten by dogs, and that was transmitted around the national park. And we had, for example, created some water systems to separate water points between livestock and humans and wildlife. And this kid came up and said, now when I walk my livestock, to get to the borehole, to the water system, well, I can go back home and study, before I had to walk 8 hours. So that was a young kid, a young boy, before he had to take his livestock to walk very far. And now he could just, walk it to a few 100 meters. And the impact that we see on education, water and education, is phenomenal. And we have, well, there are many examples, but I think it's just seeing the new generation realizing also that what you can do in a community and what their mothers can do in the community can bring incredible change.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for sharing that. And you also talk about how women are powerful agents of change. And you also mentioned this point earlier that, which we took also from the panelists, that if women are at the center of this approach, do you think that will really help in empowering them at a community level, directly leading to not only their improved health, but also better environmental outcomes?
Yes, and I think When I was living in Africa, I also was trying to figure out how can I demonstrate the benefits of One Health. And I had, I've had opportunities in my childhood to go to Morocco, and I returned to Morocco after living in Southern Africa to deploy the One Health approach in the argan forest. And I don't know if some of you are familiar with the argan oil, which is obviously an extraordinary oil that is used for its marvelous cosmetic property. And it has got the most incredible system by which you have the argan tree, which exists only in one place in the world, in the southwest of Morocco. And its deep root system is a shield against desertification. So it has got a most incredible ecological role. But also it supports the livelihood of 2 million people, because women, and only women, have got the skills and traditional knowledge to extract the oil from the argan nut. And that knowledge has been perennised, transmitted through generation, and thanks to the work of a few pioneers I'm lucky enough to work with, and who have demonstrated the properties of the argan oil, women have created argan oil cooperatives. Now this is a product that is widely used, and as I said, the argan oil is supporting the livelihood of 2 million people through this, and the argan forest still exists.
Thank you, Julie. And also your work focuses really on fragile ecosystems. And how do gender and environmental vulnerabilities intersect in these landscapes? And how do we build an inclusive resilience that centers the most marginalized of the world?
Well, I think, yes, we need to recognize biodiversity is foundational to life, and women have got the most incredible knowledge about biodiversity. Plant diversity, they are just seed guardians. They will have home gardens. I remember in Bolivia, I was working with a Tacana community around Madidi National Park, and these elder women were showing me their home gardens. And in many cultures, in many communities, women will have their gardens where they grow crops, species, fruits, which provide a buffer in terms of resilience, in terms of crisis, sorry. And now we know the crises are not once in a lifetime, they just accumulate. So women, through this knowledge, through these adaptive practices, will bring resilience to their community and to their families. And I think this is recognizing again the immense knowledge and power of women in preserving biodiversity and transmitting environmental knowledge.
So that brings me to one of the conversations that we were having about taboos and stigmas. And I was talking to Julie, and she was telling me also that she was speaking about new infectious diseases and zoonotic diseases, and we came to the conversation of tuberculosis, which in my country, in India, is still a taboo. And I had tuberculosis when I was 17 years old, and this is the first time I'm actually talking about it. So I was 17, and I just still realized that nobody in my family even goes back and realizes I was paralyzed for a year. So I just feel that, is it because I was a woman? Is it that when diseases are concerning women, also when we talk about endometriosis and conversations that lead to women's health, how do we make sure that world starts paying attention to half of the world's population, that's women, especially when it comes to the conversation of diseases that affect women?
I think we need to have a dual approach. The bottom-down approach is important, but the bottom-up approach is really important. And I think first it goes through giving women the agency which is sufficient for them to have a sense of self-esteem, and to recognize that having a disease, having endometriosis, having urinary infection, which also is very important in terms of antimicrobial resistance, and you've got many diseases, and quite often women will just say, well, I don't, I'm fine. I will leave my family first, Or culturally, in some countries, women are just not allowed to go to access, public health services. And at the same time, we need to have public health policies which recognize that women are missing access, and give more training, education, awareness raising, health education to women. So it needs to work both ways. But I think the first point, and that's part of our program, is to have, awareness raising and education programs with women to say, hang on, if you are sick, you deserve to go to health services. You need to access those and to give them the means to go there.
Thank you, Julie. And that also, I see there are a lot of young women in the audience. And based on your experience and your research, if there was one thing that you would tell the women in the audience that they could go out of this room with, what they can do in their own communities, if there's a message that you want to give them, what would that be?
Well, I think don't be shy, and I think women have a voice. And to me, I came to recognize the strengths of women because I've always worked with nature. That's my primary work. I'm a veterinarian. I work with wildlife, and my passion is nature. And I've recognized, the strengths of women for nature. So yes, we need to give women a voice in all the communities, but we need also to give nature a voice and reconnect these two. And then we can solve crisis, through equity, but recognizing the rights of women and recognizing the rights of nature and linking the two.
They're already linked, and we're not having that conversation yet. All right, I think, so we have 4 minutes to go for this chat to end. So I obviously went off the script and said a lot of things I wasn't planning to say. But I have one more question, is about being prepared for what would happen next. Is, as someone who's dedicated her career to pioneering One Health solutions, what gives you hope, and what do you think we need to do to be prepared before we have a next pandemic? And what are the steps that we need to take? And do we need to take it now, or did we have to take it yesterday?
Yes, I think it's really important to recognize, we're talking about it with various people, and it's not a question of if there's going to be another pandemic, it's a question of when. We know that. At the moment we've got avian flu circulating, we've got a lot of crises looming, but we have to take action. We have to be prepared. So, for example, in terms of zoonotic disease pandemic, there are a lot of actions to be taken, and recognize that people on the ground, communities on the ground, are sentinels for One Health. That's what we do in our programs. We empower people on the ground to be able to detect what's going on first, because when you have, for example, a pandemic, as we have learned, you need to be able to contain it very rapidly so it doesn't spread. And who is going to be able to recognize it but people on the ground? So, for example, when those people who work with wildlife, people who work with animals, they are the ones who need to be trained, educated. Then you need to strengthen all the health services. You need to integrate health services. Animal health services, vet services, and public health services. That's happening. There are now directions, guidelines to develop what we call One Health action plans in the different countries. And this is happening, not quickly enough. So there are a lot of ways by which we are, trying to prevent and be prepared, because that's what's happening. And also recognize, link the two together and deploy this One Health approach, because by building resilience in communities, linking climate, climate resilience, biodiversity conservation and health, then you can build, a stronger resilience. So it's really linking the two, identifying risks, addressing these risks so people are better prepared and they can also resist to shocks better. And I think that's what it's all about, build resilience and be prepared, but also, at the same time as we are going, hopefully, through the events like today, seeing the young generation, there is a whole new generation there in the audience who are engaged in sustainable development. And I think people are ready to make change, are ready to change, the energy consumption patterns, the food consumption patterns. So we need to bring change at all levels. and bringing change in an integrated, holistic way so that it is more impactful. So we need to be prepared for what's coming next, but also we need to go on the positive path, quicker, faster, with more impact through One Health.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for such an incredible chat. And thank you so much for also sharing your paper with me. And of course, if anybody else wants to follow Julie's work, you have her name on the screen and you can follow her work. And that brings us to the end of the conversation. So I'm going to thank you, Julie, and you can take back.